What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to do one of the last things that probably needs to be talked about in terms of that application process. And this is really going to be before um, everything else. I mean, I do have a video that's going to come out a week later that's going to talk about like the waiting process and stuff like that, and this is kind of embedded into that, but I want to make this its separate video because of the importance I believe that this holds. It probably should have been a little bit higher in through the episode list or whatever. However, you can't most schools, you're not going to get through or to this point without going through everything else first. So I felt like I needed to cover those. Those were the most important. I tried to cover them, in my opinion, in order of importance, and go from there and move on, like so. Excuse me. So yeah, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the interview process, what that looks like, or what that looked like for me. I know it's going to be completely different for each school. Questions may be completely different or things of that nature. So with my process, I got a phone call from the I don't know if she does recruitment or admission. I believe she's admission. But she called me trying to secure a day that worked for me, a day and time that worked for me in terms of my interview. And then also, like, the interview was held over Zoom. I do know some schools have like interviews in person. I don't know if Texas Tech has changed how they did things, but I know initially Tech, you had to drive up to or you had to go to their vet school location, and you basically spent the whole weekend there doing multiple different things outside of just interviewing. But a lot of it was the build up to the interview to help kind of keep you calm, stuff like that. At least in my situation, interview was on Zoom, so solidified a day and time that worked for me. Obviously, then that day came. For me, I dressed up like I was going to a regular interview in person, and especially since this was vet school, I threw on my graduation suit. So I was suited and booted. That's just how I was raised. I would implore to do the same, especially since you're going into a professional program, or you're interested in going to a professional program. For those that are who have found these videos and are interested in vet school, I would recommend suited and booted, business, professional, whatever the case may be. Not that it's necessarily required. That's just my recommendation. Before the interview, me and my brother prayed, so shout out to him. And then I got into the interview. I tried to be as early as possible, even though it was through Zoom. But at the end of the day, once again, it's just how I was raised. Early is on time. So I tried to get on 5 to 10 minutes before my actual interview time slot. Then my interviewers, they joined the Zoom call as well, and we started kind of discussing. And it was just, we tried, the best thing or best advice I can give when it comes to interviews is try to make it like a normal conversation. Don't make it feel like it's an actual interview where it's you're like in a hot seat and it's a Q&A. Make it a conversation. Try to be as personable as possible. So for the most part, they hit on a good chunk of the stuff that I put in my application, for the most part. And then they also obviously asked the main question, like, oh, why do you want to be a veterinarian? Right? So you can answer with, always had a love for animals, but put your own little spin on it. So like for me, truly did have a passion for animals. Grew up watching like Animal Planet and stuff like that. Kind of forced my family to watch that with me, and just had that knowledge, and then also additional experiences that I've had aided in that, right? Just like an example of an answer. What other questions did they ask? they did ask some questions about my grades because there were some issues there. Not issues per se, but I definitely did have a class that I retook 2 or 3 different times. So they're kind of asking like what went on there. Um, they asked like what type of professions can veterinarians hold. So it's just stuff that you answer to the best of your ability. I was asked about vaccines and or like what are the 4 recommended vaccines for dogs, and then the natures of these vaccines or the diseases that come for those vaccines, right? Or not from the vaccines, but from the actual live specimen, whether it's bacterial or viral, things of that nature. So it's things that you just want to answer to the best of your ability. It's gonna kind of test some of your basic animal science knowledge, and then on top of that, if you had extensive um, work in a clinic, it's gonna test some of that as well. See how much you kind of retain and how much you know going into coming into your first semester. Like where is your base at? Now, granted, if you don't know a whole lot, I believe that's perfectly fine, because at the end of the day, you are there to learn. And ultimately, when it becomes to becoming a veterinarian or being the veterinarian itself, you kind of set the precedent for your team whenever you get into that space. But that can be a completely different discussion at a different time. So you're there to learn what these things are, how they affect the body, and things of that nature. Now, obviously, like I said, any additional information you already have is gonna help a lot. So yeah, you want to be, like I said, make it as personable as possible. Make it a conversation versus just simply um, a Q&A. Make sure you have questions on hand at the ready to ask them as well. You will have time for that. Funnily enough, during my interview, one of my interviewers, she had to leave for another um, obligation. In the process of that, the Zoom call dropped when she left. And so what I did is I made sure to get back into that Zoom call with the other interviewer, and she really appreciated that. And then we continued for another like 15 to 20 minutes, just having conversation about um, some of the stuff going on. And it just so happened to turn out that she um, was either classmates or a year above or below my mentor. So she told me to tell him. She said hey and stuff like that. And so ultimately, like I said, I feel like I'm a robot just repeating myself over and over again. But when it comes to interviews, it's the best thing. I those are the best things that come to my mind. Right? Make sure you're as calm as possible. But it's okay to be nervous. That's perfectly normal. Um, And then like me personally, I try to be very honest in my interviews. So, they asked how I was feeling. I told them I was like, I'm kind of nervous. I can't lie, because obviously this is something that I want to go into. This is where I want to be. So trying to make sure I don't mess that up. Right. But for the most part, they do a great job. And um, at least my interviewers, I can't say the same for everybody's, and I can't say the same for every school, but just once again, my experience, and then trying to give as best of advice off of that experience. But most people, I feel like, will do a great job to try and help you stay calm, get to a point where you're able to fluently answer questions and turn it into a conversation. So yeah, that's for the most part my tips and tricks, I guess, are in terms of that interview process, what that looks like. And then also, like I said, or like I kind of mentioned in the um, waiting period phase or whatever of my next video, right? The interview, your applications like are submitted September 16th. That's the deadline for VMCAS. Then I officially did not um, well, and then you have your supplementals that normally do a different time or whatever the case may be. I didn't receive any information about my interview until I believe January of 25. So that's roughly what? It's roughly 3 or 4 months, right? Of just kind of waiting, and then after I did my interview. Um, it was an additional month or two before I actually got my acceptance letter. Um, that is going to touch a little bit more into that the waiting process itself. But I will say, like, once you do certain things, I believe that that final step is that interview process. If you do really well in that, you're most likely going to get accepted into whatever school you're interviewing with. Um, with that, like, truly just pack your patience and just be ready to answer any and all questions that you believe you have the knowledge to answer. That doesn't mean go acquire additional information that you may not fully get the grasp of, because if you bring that up and they ask you to elaborate on it and then you can't, it looks kind of rough. There were definitely some that I couldn't fully remember, and I was, like I said, try to be as honest as possible. I don't fully remember that right now, but I believe it's this. And then from my answer, they either corrected me, or for most part, or for some of it, I was actually spot on. And they say, yeah, you like that's what it was, this, that, and the third. Um, I don't believe they try to trick you or anything like that. At the end of the day, there is a discrepancy in the number of veterinarians, and they're trying to fill that as best as possible. Obviously, you want competent veterinarians as well, so you're trying to pick the best candidates possible, because they are getting thousands upon thousands of applications, and most, like I've said before, most schools only sit maybe 120. I think that's the highest I've heard from schools. That there could be other schools that do higher than 120. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, with that being said, that's gonna wrap up this. That's gonna wrap up this video. All right. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. So that's gonna wrap up this video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Don't hesitate to share that. Or share this video with anyone else who you think might need this information, as well as comment down below any other tips and tricks that you may personally have when it comes to the interview process, or for those that are that do find this channel that are already in vet school, things that different experiences that y'all have had through that interview process, just so that way there is a wide variety overall. With that being said, I will catch y'all in the next video. Peace.